more with queen c2, there's always knight to b4, which does hit the queen and kind of also defends that c-pawn with the rook from c8. So it seems difficult to me after a queen defense from black. We actually see queen b6 instead of a5. It seems difficult to add more pressure to this pawn other than the d4 move that you keep talking about.
Yeah, and I do want to highlight to everybody wondering right now why b6 would not be the move, simply because the a6 pawn, unfortunately, would be falling. That was the whole idea. And now the fact that the queen is protecting the pawn, I would say it's not the most flattering position for the lady as we see on the position, but maybe it's just temporarily.
Yeah, hard to imagine no knight b4 here. But actually, we see bishop f5. I was definitely expecting knight b4 and maybe the queen to move, but instead bishop f5, kind of solving the problem a bit more aggressively with a pin there. And let's remember as well, Magnus can make a draw, so Hikaru at any point just has to be careful of even opposite bishop positions, right? Bishop takes the knight on e4 could create some opposite bishop opportunities.
Yeah, I think in that case, Hikaru would have to go all in on the king using this e-pawn, this new e-pawn, in order to trade the f6, the defender, as I already mentioned. But I do want to say something positive about this position and Hikaru's situation. I do believe he has more chances right now to get the game rather than compared with the game number 2 where Hikaru had white pieces.
Right, that's fair. There's a little bit more going on. Now, he's probably objectively taken a worse position here compared to last game in order to have those chances. But if you're in a must-win game, I agree that that's probably the position you should be in.
Yeah, and now the knight is on your favorite b4 square. a3 obviously is happening. Knight rerouting to d5. Now knight d2, very nice way of putting the knight. Preparing knight c4, kicking the queen. But you gotta be careful. b5 is gonna be on the way.
Yeah, the queen can actually go pretty nicely to the a7 square if it gets attacked. I would probably choose that over c7 just because c7 walks onto the c file, kind of dangerous with the rook there, and I'm looking at d4 and b4. So yeah, if the queen drops back to, and okay, it does go to c7. I was really confident in queen to a7 as a move there.
And now we see this blue little sneaky arrow suggesting d4, and Hikaru does it, opening the c-file for the rook! And knight d6, is that a blunder from Magnus Carlsen?
Well, it feels like, didn't I just say that? Why would you put the queen on c7? It's so strange there. And what did we talk about, Dina? All it takes is one move, all it takes is one decision, and he completely forgot that this move was even playable. That's a basic tactic, and Hikaru is right back in it.
And instead of sacrificing the rook, Magnus decides to give away his queen, which is even more questionable.
Yeah, I have to say I do agree with giving up the queen at this point, because it feels like it's such an elementary win if you're just up the exchange. But at least here there's an imbalance, and there are some positions where you just can't really break through. So, and we see it's this is a fight, Dina. This is absolutely not game over or anything. Those are some very strong bishops, very strong rooks for Magnus. And despite the mistake, is this reminding you of their previous match? Do you remember when Magnus just blundered the entire piece and then Hikaru was still losing down a rook, right? He had an extra rook.
I'll be honest with you, Aman. I do not want to remember that.
There's probably one person in here who doesn't want to remember either, but it is reminding me exactly of that. Magnus blunders, and yet still it's almost equal. Crazy.
And what just happened? We were just processing the queen sacrifice, but look, right after Hikaru plays this queen d4, and look at the eval bar. It doesn't like it. Apparently after bishop e5, black is back to the game.
Yep. Queen does not have good squares to go to, right? Queen on a7, I'm starting to get concerned as to whether the queen actually has a path out, but of course has to, right? There's no way we're not that we would get trapped and lose the game, but obviously a repetition also ends this match. So you have to be so careful that your queen actually has an escape route.
Oh, and the b6 trying to trap the queen as you mentioned, but queen a6 and just going out of the of that danger zone with the queen to e2. And I want to highlight to everybody, we are currently having a queen versus a rook and a bishop, which is technically not enough as a compensation, but this position is so solid in terms of the pawn structure. We just saw a almost total symmetrical situation, and now you'd think that white gained the pawn on a6, but there is a pawn in a3 that is also falling, and it seems like the position is just not open enough for white to convert that queen advantage.
And there's something important to point out about this imbalance, is that if the pawns on b3 and b6 disappear, the chances of a draw are much, much higher. Usually if you have the extra material, you want to have pawns on the side of the board. You want to have the threat of a potential queen. So the fact that there was 2 pawns on the queen side for both, and there might become 0, is really good for Magnus Carlsen's drawing chances, because you just want to eliminate things. And imagine that we trade every single thing that's equal in this position. Dina, it's going to be the queen against the rook and the bishop, and that's not going to be enough to win.
Yeah, they're like, it only takes these B pawns to be traded in order for black to have that ideal fortress. No way Hikaru can actually break through. And now we see rook c8 on the board. The eval bar is slightly going up, but then it's going down, and then it's still equal.
Well, let's also remind everyone that this is a really, really tough position for even the best players in the world to get a grip on. We're not looking at an extra pawn position where everyone can understand my position is just better because I have 1 extra pawn. This is a position where black could also be better as well, right? You have an imbalance where the minor pieces and the rooks can actually play really, really nicely together. And look at the evaluation. Magnus is better.
What just happened with this rook on e1 and the queen on f1 and the king on g1? It only takes bishop to h1 and knight to b1 to declare a freestyle begin.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be too excited about this position. He also knows after b5, it took away such a key c4 square from himself. He's moving the bishop back so he can maybe threaten f4, but Magnus is pouncing on this position. He knows that he can eliminate that b pawn if the knight has to move, and it's Hikaru who's shaking his head because that's the pawn disappearing. It's not even, I mean, the queen's almost trapped with bishop c4.
I'm telling you, bishop h1 is the move.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Bishop c4 is such an incredibly strong move here. It literally wins the entire queen. So your bishop h1 is such a sad concession, but it might be necessary. The b pawn is going, though. Hikaru's got that extra queen, but it's been him who's been being outplayed.
Yep. And that's honestly a little bit sad to me, but we do still have some hope here for Armageddon if Hikaru manages to open up the king, which he is doing right now with this f4 move, targeting the e5, and just hoping to get some checks on the dark squares. Remember, all it takes for the queen is to have an activity.
Yeah, he's definitely trying here, but there are so many ways for black to lock down this game, and speaking of lockdown, the move e4 does exactly that. b4 would be such a devastating shot. But I would say, yeah, rook a2 is more natural because he wants to bring the other rook down to d2, and then there's all the threats in the position.
Ouch. Even if you play bishop to e4, oh, f6, okay. Attacking the king, hoping for the king g8 and queen c8 checkmate.
Yeah, he's hoping on basically a prayer there. King goes back to g7, and although there's queen e5 picking up the knight, you're also dropping your bishop on g2.
And walking right into a checkmate into.
Yep, and also if the king moves, white can make a draw by repeating. I think that's why Hikaru is kind of, just grimacing. He's not happy. He knows that if black, just moves the king back and forth and white checks with the queen, yeah, congrats, you made a draw from a bad position, but Magnus is more than happy with that.
Yeah, I was even thinking about, taking the pawn on e4, knight takes, queen takes, and then sacrificing the rooks with rook g2, forcing the exchange endgame for white, which would not be winning. But this is not happening. Queen f4, queen c7. Are we going to see a perpetual?
Well, yeah, obviously the eval bar is saying, wait a minute, what are you doing? You're ruining this position. But Magnus he's aware of the match situation. He knows that queen f4 is going to be 3 times after king back to g7, Yeah, he's completely happy with that. I think maybe after queen f4, king g7, he could play one more move. I'm not sure if it's exactly 3, but Hikaru, does he have better? I mean, I just can't even see any reasonable attempts here. He's worse, and his time is also expiring.
That could be the end of the Chessable Masters 2025 qualifier number 1.
It definitely looks like there's just no winning against Magnus Carlsen this event for Hikaru Nakamura.
Well, the bright side is that most likely, as you mentioned, Aman, they both are already qualified for the Esports Cup, but we would love to see just yet another game, yet another Armageddon at the very least.
Yeah, this is kind of what I was expecting. He has one more move, but look how much time he's spending. I think this is more of a mental thing at the moment. We've definitely been there as chess players. You know that things are slipping away. His time is so low that even if he tried to play on here, he would probably lose on time. So at this point, it's just coming to terms with the result and realizing that even with that Magnus Carlsen blunder, stone cold blunder of knight d6 earlier, as time ticks down, I think he will probably claim this draw.
Yep.